This meeting is now being recorded.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Molarski. I am the Policy Director for the Missouri Coalition of Children's Agencies. Today is February 28, 2019, excuse me. And this webinar is meant to just be kind of an open training for our medication certification program. All of you should be seeing my screen, which is currently displaying, with my web browser open, displaying our sandbox site for LMS Checkout. So LMS Checkout is our main platform for facilitating medication certification classes. It is your gateway to managing your courses, managing your classes, and managing students, and also managing student certificates. This system is complemented by a testing site, which this site will redirect you to, so you don't really ever have to directly visit the testing site for initial students to take their online test. So we don't have anyone attending live today, but that's okay. We're recording this, and I just want to kind of go over a couple of common questions that people get. And maybe even do a little bit of a deep dive into the topic of obtaining certificates. In any case, I'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing, in order to access your courses, your classes, your students, you will always use a web browser. That can be any web browser, Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox. I prefer to use Chrome. And a desktop computer. You definitely want to be using a desktop computer. Tablets, phones are not supported by MECA's MedCert interface. And in your web browser up here in the location bar, you want to go to your LMS checkout site, as we covered in the last webinar. If you do not know what your LMS checkout site is, because every organization does have its own website, then one way to find out is to go to our website, MECA's proper website, that is e-meca.org, and go to the manuals and guides page, which is located here at the. There's a link on every page at the right, about the middle, on the right side and about the middle. And the main guide to our web system, not to be confused with the actual MedCert manual. That's about how to teach these classes. But for our web system, probably the primary guide is this one, the General Overview and Class Creation Guide. And among other things, there's a big overview of a lot of the stuff I've already talked about. There's this guide, part of the guide here on the bottom of page 2, talking about how to find your organization's LMS checkout site, and it actually lists all the organizations and the site. But every URL, that's the web address, is structured the same. There's an organization code, and then it's .lmscheckout.com. For demonstration purposes, meca.lmscheckout.com is what we'll use here in this webinar. Both students and nurses will, initial students, I should say, not renewal students, but initial students and nurse instructors will be using this site. And everyone, initial students and nurse instructors, will all have their own login. With the username and a password. Your username is your email address. Your password is your password that is set whenever your account is created. If you forget your password, which happens quite commonly, you will want to click this link here for Forgot Password, and then simply type in your email address and submit, and you should get an email giving you instructions and a link to reset your password. A lot of students have to do this, particularly if they've lapsed. They will need to reset their password. I get a very common question I get is, well, my students didn't get a link to test. 99% of the time, the solution to that is your student just needs to open a web browser, go to your LMS checkout site, and click login and forgot password, and that solves it 99% of the time. I don't have. In most cases, there's no special way for administrators to reset a password or allow someone to log in. There's a couple exceptions to that, but in most cases, the student resetting the password is the exact same as the administrator resetting the password. All right, so you log in, and if you're a nurse instructor, you should see this link that says admin panel. Sometimes it will redirect you right directly to the admin panel, but if it doesn't, then up here in the top right is where the admin panel link is. And almost every class management task starts with managed courses and live classes. That'll list all of your classes. But the thing I really want to talk about today is certificates. So the main way to access certificates, and I highly recommend this, is to use reports and certifications. You'll notice there's a lot of links on this site that we don't use. View Store, some cases there's a little help link here. Tax reports, class reports, we don't use any of that. On reports, we use report certifications to get student expiration dates. This is really important because in our MedCert system, there's kind of two classifications of students, two types of classes. One is for initial certification, and this is if somebody is coming on for the first time. If they're a brand new student, they've never had a medication certification certificate before, or if someone's certificate is lapsed. MECA facilitated MedCert certificates are good for 14 months. So if 14 months pass and you lapse, then you have to take the initial course. If you're just renewing, if your current certificate is good, then you can take a renewal class, which is only 3 hours and doesn't require online testing. So initial students have to take an 8-hour class and pass an online test. That online test requires that they log into the LMS checkout site, by the way, and then they do what's called demonstrating competencies, which usually, that varies by organization, but usually it involves a kind of a mock exercise of providing medication and like using like a pill bottle instead of real pills. Some organizations use M&Ms. But initial students have to demonstrate competencies, and then you as the nurse instructor certify them. The renewal process is similar but simpler. It's a shorter class. It's a 3-hour class, and they don't have to take the online test. They don't have to log into LMS checkout. You as the nurse instructor just manage them in LMS checkout, manage the class. They demonstrate competencies. They do a 3-hour class, they demonstrate competencies, and boom, they're renewed. This is cheaper as well, and not only is it less time consuming and a simpler process, but renewals are cheaper. So very often we get the question of, how do I tell whether a student is about to expire? Because if they're about to expire, you want to get them renewed, because it's going to cost less money and time than letting them lapse. And this is one way to manage that, this reports screen. So again, you log into your site, get to the admin panel, do reports and certifications, and you will be greeted with this table of every student on your site that has been certified. In some cases, since we started doing this, even before we started using these websites, we do have some old certification records from before. And this is, again, a table with 4 columns. First column is the user's name. Second column is their expiration status. Third column is their expiration. There's another column here with these plus signs, which I'll go over in a second. But you can sort. This first row is the header row, and you can sort by the header row by clicking the button next to it. Okay, so I have now sorted all of my students that are certified by their expiration date, with the expiration date that is farthest in the future up top. And so I can tell that John Smith, for example, and Mary Jones are about to expire in April. So I should probably try to organize a renewal class for at least those students before April 17th in this case. One caveat with this table is currently, at the time of this recording, you see the expiration date that is about to happen soonest So occasionally, if you've just had a renewal class, by default, and somebody hasn't quite expired yet because you just had the renewal class, their current certification hasn't expired. The new expiration date, the one that is the result of you just certifying them, doesn't immediately show up. So the solution is this plus sign. You click it, and it shows all of the expiration dates. Sometimes you got to click this plus sign to see the expiration date that's farthest in the future, if there's one that's coming up soon. So the bottom line is don't panic until you click the plus sign, honestly, to look at all the expiration dates. Let's talk about certifying people to that end. So you have a course or a class that you just held, and students have passed competencies. I'm going to try and pick one with some fake students in it, so bear with me a second. By the way, to get here, always manage courses, live classes. If you don't see your classes, you can use this link between active and archive classes to toggle them, and you can use the header rows to sort. So usually one of the first things I'm doing on a site is I'm going to manage courses, live classes, and then sorting the table so that the most current classes show up first. And then I can kind of scroll around and click around for the class that I'm looking for. In order to go into a class, you want to expand the class record by clicking the plus sign on the left, similar to the certification table. The general overview and class creation guide shows you what you need to do on this part of the form. There's a couple fields that we don't use. SKU number and product code, for example, we don't use. We don't care about shipping. We're not selling products that need to be shipped. The things that you want to really pay attention to are make sure active class is checked, make sure the proper cost is here. It's either going to be 20 or 40 or 25 or 50, depending on whether it's a renewal class or an initial class, and whether you are a member organization or not. So members obviously pay a little less. The price guide is here and on page 2 of the general overview and class creation guide. But having but there's two things that kind of tell us whether it's an initial class or a renewal class. One is what you put here in the cost, and the other is what you put in for the class ID. We really prefer that your class ID be something that says initial or renewal, and that helps us with invoicing, so we know how to invoice you. You also want to make sure that a signed certificate is set to MECA certificate final. And when you do that, this link here below that drop down appears view issued certificates. But back to what I was about to talk about, the class roster is where you certify students, and it's probably the most important part of the process. It looks like this, okay? Let's pretend, for example, that these are not real students, but let's pretend that this is a renewal class. These students are not certified until I click the competency completed box and save changes. And once I do that, that person will have there'll be a certificate created for that person in the system, and it will expire 14 months after I click the save change, after I check that box and click the save changes button. That part of the form is the most important. As a side note, you never will need to type anything here in results or credit hours. For initial students, the test score should appear here on the Friday after they test, unless some problem happened. But nurse instructors should never be entering anything in here or here. The only thing that you should be doing on this form is verifying whether email addresses are spelled right, and when you're ready to certify, check the students box and click Save Changes. Once you do that, then the student's record on report certifications should update. with the new expiration date, and their certificate should appear in View Issued Certificates. And then, by the way, this is how nurse instructors can get a copy of students' certificates. There's two buttons here. One displays a print-friendly version of the certificate. The other one emails the certificate to the student. I want to spend a little more time on this step, by the way, because we occasionally will have problems where the nurse instructor will forget to check competency completed, or there's no one checking competency completed for classes. And we are not allowed as MECA staff to certify people. We're not licensed nurses. Only you can do that as a licensed nurse. So if you have a past class, like maybe several months ago, where competency completed was not checked, and you want to know why didn't and usually sometimes the question is posed to us, well, why didn't this student get a certificate, and why does the expiration date say something like 2 years ago? The reason is sometimes the reason is you forgot to check off on competencies. So you have to check on competencies. If you don't, then the only way we can correct it is if you have something on your end that proves that either you sign an affidavit that asserts that you certified that student on that day, or you have something similar in terms of your organization records. Otherwise, we can't provide the certificate. We can't certify students, is the bottom line, and that can again lead to some very bad outcomes because you won't necessarily have a certificate for your student when you're asked for one during an inspection. So please check off on competencies. Please do not forget that step. And if you have any questions, please email me. My email address is just my first name, Jeremy, at e-meca.org. Okay. If you need a walkthrough on what I just talked about, that is also here on the manuals and guides page. There's a video where we talk about how to enable print-friendly certificates for previously held classes, checking expiration dates, and also, and this is a video, and this is the walkthrough version of that video. Okay. So I think I won't spend a lot of time on recording today, but probably the biggest takeaway that folks can get is to use these resources on this page. The difference between someone using these resources on this page and not is the difference between someone spending hours and hours and hours on MedCert, having incorrect invoices sent to their organization, and not having those things happen. But we're here to help, and we worked pretty hard to create some of these walkthroughs and tutorials. Okay. And make sure that you are signed up for our mailing list. We send out about one tip per week on MedCert. And also you can email us, and we'll respond as quickly as we can. I've responded to emails on weekends. I don't have a problem doing that. So, okay. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the hard work you do certifying people to responsibly give medication to children in Missouri.